Hi, this is Mrs. Kidman, and in this video, we're going to be discussing how we can evaluate logarithmic expressions when they don't have a base of 10, they don't have a base of e, and they don't go in perfectly. So we've looked at some examples of things where a logarithmic function has a different base, but it goes in perfectly. For example, the log base 2 of 16. Well, what we can do here is we're asking ourselves, how many times do I need to divide 16 by 2 until I can get to 1? Well, I can divide it once to get 8. I can divide it twice to get 4. I can divide it 3 times to get 2, and I can divide it a 4th time to get a 1. Therefore, we know this equals 4. So that's one way to do it. Then we talked about what happens if we have something like log base 10 of 20. And we established how, even though that doesn't divide evenly, our calculators have a default of log base 10. So that means in my calculator, I can do log of 20, and it's going to spout out the answer there, where the log of 20 is going to be something like 1.30. We also talked about how base e gives us that natural log, or our ln, where we can look at it that way. Now, what do we do if it doesn't go in perfectly and it's not a base 10 or a base e, because we don't have a button on our calculator? Our option is to change our base. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to use this idea of changing the base of our logarithm by changing it into something that we prefer to do our math with, so we can do it in our calculator. For example, if I had the log base 2 of 10. Now, if I have the number 10, I can divide it by 2 and get 5. I can take 5 and divide it by 2 and get 2.5. I can take 2.5 and divide it by 2 and get 1.25. But then once I take that 1.25 and divide it by 2, I end up getting something like 0.625. So what we end up seeing is it needs at least 3 divisions, but it doesn't need 4. So that means I need something between 3 and 4. Now, my calculator doesn't have a log base 2 option that we know of yet, and we'll talk about that at a later time. But what we can do is we can actually just change the base into something that we do have a base of. So for the sake of this example, I'm going to change it into log base 10, so I can use the log button. But if you would prefer to change it into a natural log base where it's a base of e, that also works. So what we do when we change the base is we take the log of whatever our new base is of the number we're putting in, so that a, and we divide it by the log of our base. So for example, log base 2 of 10, we're going to take the log of 10 and divide it by the log of 2, where 10 is the number we're putting in and 2 is our base of our original one. And as we do that in our calculator, you can see that log of 10 divided by log of 2 is going to give us that 3.3219. And so we can see how that gave us that solution there, where we were right between 3 and 4, which is what we were looking for. So we can always change that base, and then we can use our calculator. So that's our third option, is doing that change of base. So let's look at a couple of examples where we do that. So here we are, log base 3 of 8. Well, I know if I have 8 and I divide it by 3, well, that's not going to be pretty, just to start with. And it's just going to get worse after that. So I'm not even going to worry about doing it that way. It's not going to be pretty. So what can we do instead? Well, we can change the base. So that means I'm going to do the log of the number I'm putting in, or the number I'm dividing, 8, divided by the log of the number I would divide by, or my base, which is 3. Now in my calculator, if I do log of 8 divided by log of 3, what I end up getting is something like 1.8928, something like this. And we can choose how many decimal places we round to. You'll see me in this video round to 4 decimal places, but sometimes people will round to 2. So make sure you're clear about what you need. But we can always do that change of base there by just taking what we're dividing and divide it by the log of our base. So let's take a look at 2 more examples here, doing that same sort of thing. So 24, this one's a little different. If I divide it by 6, I get 4, but then 4 divided by 6 gives us 2/3. So in our minds, this tells us, okay, here we're looking at something between 1 and 2, because it needed 1 division, but not quite needed 2. So let's look at it. We can do the log of 24 and divide it by our log of 6. Because we're going to take what we're dividing up into pieces. We're asking ourselves, how many times do I need to divide this? divided by the log of our base. And so the log of 24 divided by the logarithm of 16, both in base 10, gives us 1.7737, rounding out to those 4 decimal places. So we can tell that it's right in between that 1 and 2. Now let's take a look at this last one here. We're going to do that same sort of thing, our change of base. We want a log of 22 divided by a log of 8. Now remember, we can always check to see if this is right by doing our 22 divided by 8. Well, if we do 22 divided by 8, we end up getting something like 2.75. And then we take our 2.75 and divide it by 8, and that is going to give us something like 0.34. And so we know it's going to be somewhere between 1 and 2 divisions, or that answer is going to be a value between 1 and 2. So let's take a look at what that would be. So the log of 22 divided by the log of 8 gives us 1.4865. Therefore, we can see it's right in between that 1 and 2. So again, the idea of repeated division is really what a logarithmic function is. It's just the opposite of our exponential. We're taking it and we're dividing it over and over. And we can look at how many times we need to divide it when we evaluate it. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out, but that is how we can evaluate logarithmic functions or logarithmic expressions, by changing the base. So regardless of the base, we can always use this change of base option and our calculator to do it. Now, all the examples I did in this video involved doing a change of base with base 10, changing into base 10, but you can always change it into whatever base you would like. So if you'd rather change these into base 2, you can. That's not really helpful in our calculator, but it can be done. So it's totally up to you how you do this. But don't hesitate to reach out with any questions on evaluating logarithmic expressions.